What's the plan? Does it go beyond dropping bombs from the sky? Day 3 of the U.S. and Israeli campaign that's killed Iran's supreme leader. The United States at first insisting there'd be no boots on the ground. Donald Trump now opening the door for perhaps some deployment, while the U.S. Defense Secretary says it's all about nuclear installations and missile launchers. The U.S. president has been speaking about laying the groundwork for regime change. Already the escalation's gone well beyond last June's 12 days of bombing raids. Did the Pentagon properly prepare for Tehran firing not just on Israel, alongside its Lebanese proxy Hezbollah, but also targeting Gulf states, with missiles landing as far away as Cyprus? The missiles shutting down Qatar's gas production this Monday, damaging at least one oil field in Saudi Arabia and shutting the Strait of Hormuz, passageway that ships more than 1/5 of the world's oil and gas. We'll hear the Trump administration's rationale for starting this war, weigh the unintended consequences, and whether a U.S. president, who so often is used as military to push red lines, from the 2020 assassination of charismatic Iranian Revolutionary Guards commander Qasem Soleimani to the seizing of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, can he use force as he pleases against an Islamic Republic that back in January proved it was unafraid to slaughter its own people by the thousands, if that's what it takes to ensure its survival? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking, will it be boots on the ground after all? And joining us, he was the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired General Wesley Clark. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome as well to journalist and Professor Tara Kangaroo, author of The Heartbeat of Iran. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Francois.
Ali Vaez is Director of Iran Projects and Senior Advisor at the International Crisis Group think tank. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you.
And from Washington, David Makovsky, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Welcome.
Glad to be with you.
On the go, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, day 3 began with a relative lull, but then came fresh strikes on Iran's capital. A lot's been going on in the field, and we've also gotten some more on the messaging from the White House. For the beginning of the day, we heard from the Defense Secretary, who said it was all about the missiles and about the nuclear program, and then the U.S. President, who said that, maybe in the end, it will be boots on the ground. This after Pete Hegseth had said it would not be another Iraq. On day 3, Wesley Clark, what is this all about?
I think you have to go back to the beginning of 1979. The Shah of Iran was not well liked by 1977 in the United States. United States policy was to rebuke him and try to stop the what was going on in Iran with the Savak Special Police. And so we knew there was a democracy movement, and we actually sent General Alexander Haig's deputy, a 4-star Air Force general named Heiser, into Tehran to make sure the generals who were in the Iranian armed forces, who'd been educated in the United States and were part of the West, to make sure they didn't intervene to keep the Shah in power. We were in favor of a democratic transition. But unfortunately, a man named Khamenei came in, and he was virulently anti-American. And since that day, the Iranian government has been motivated by chants of death to Israel and death to America, the little Satan and the great Satan. And you say, what's it all about? It's all about if a country is established that wants to do and has no purpose other than to destroy other countries and seeks the means to do so, eventually it will get the war that it seeks. And this is the war that Iran has sought. It's come to Iran.
It's come to Iran, and we heard General Clark, Pete Hegseth, refer to 1979 in the remarks that he made. All senior officers of a certain age, whether they're in France or the United States, can remember 1983 when Hezbollah targeted military barracks, killing hundreds. Is that something that's on the mind of all soldiers, that they want revenge for 1983?
If you're asking me, the answer is no. I mean, most of the soldiers weren't even alive in 1983. And Americans generally don't operate on the principle of revenge. I know the Iranians are talking about revenge, revenge, revenge. But no, this is a matter of U.S. national interest. Every American president has said that Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. Why? Because it's the assessment of the intelligence community and the diplomatic community that if Iran were to have nuclear weapons, they would use them, not for deterrence, but actually to follow through on their stated aim to destroy another country. They would attack. And so it's been the consistent policy of the United States, and I might say France and Britain and others. We believed in non-proliferation. We didn't succeed in keeping North Korea from getting nuclear weapons. They're a nuclear state. But Iran is different. More even than North Korea, Iran has been sworn to the destruction of other countries. So we've tried through diplomacy, we've tried through sanctions, we've tried many different ways to slow down and try to stop this Iranian nuclear program. But it's here, it's full-fledged. The bombing last June didn't do it, despite President Trump saying we'd obliterated their program. We learned that they had made 650 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. They'd be within a week of creating a fissile material for a uranium nuclear weapon, and they would be inclined to use it. Their form of deterrence is actually a provocation to the West, and you can't have a state like that in the international community.
So this operation this operation was the right call.
I think it was inevitable. Now, whether this specific operation, this specific time, the way it's done, we have to see. But this was in some form inevitable unless the government in Iran changed its direction. And it certainly didn't under Ayatollah Khamenei.
Tara Congerlu, you agree?
Francois, I think we can all agree on this panel that multiple things can be true at the same time. There is no question that the Islamic regime and the regime of Ayatollah Khamenei was a rogue one that was supporting actors who were to the detriment of the U.S. interest and regional interests at large across the Middle East. And more so, it was an oppressive and repressive regime at home that choked millions of Iranians. So that is certainly true. But I think my question that I will put out there is then why did the United States pursue diplomacy? And I cannot help but to go back to the Omani foreign minister's interview on Friday when someone who, by the way, does not make a lot of public appearances, he does not often speak with the media, he went on the record and said, we made a breakthrough and a deal that is viable and to the interests of the United States and the world is indeed possible. And I wonder why he said that, and if that is true, then why the bombs? And that is my question. You
take it at face value what the Omani foreign minister said?
He was the lead negotiator, and he has for long been, and I don't know why he would say that. Did he say that because he wanted to set the record straight for the memory of history and the public, or he was concerned, or he saw something coming? But my question has always been, if conflict is preventable, then why not pursue that route? And if people are engaging in diplomacy, why not pursue that to its fullest? And furthermore, with regards to Iran's nuclear stockpile, I think, again, Ali and others on the panel can talk about this, but there are reports that these are in Isfahan. And again, if that is a known fact, then why not go after those and engage in what has really become a full-fledged war? And I can easily say that an entire region is ablaze, and I'm extremely worried that we are going to have an ugly week ahead of us.
Yeah, I want to talk about that escalation in a moment. But first, Ali Vaez, your reaction.
Look, this is certainly a regime change war. And there's no doubt that the Iranian system was anti-American and authoritarian and all of the above. But the question is whether the best way of addressing this problem was to try once again what the U.S. has tried in this region repeatedly and has only ended in grief, which is regime change through the use of force. Even in cases that the United States had a strategy and a plan for the day after, in case of Iraq, for instance, it ended in an absolute disaster. And I don't need to remind people that the United States spent 20 years and $2 trillion in Afghanistan to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. So again, the question is this the best path? And especially with an administration that doesn't think through the consequences, just throws these pieces up in the air and hopes they would land in a way that would allow the president to have a victory. And this is why I'm concerned that not only we are seeing a regional conflagration, but the United States is engaging increasingly in some sort of a mission creep and would not be able to put these pieces back together.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what's, first of all, what we can parse from those first 3 days. The targets from Israeli and U.S. strikes have been military. They've included nuclear installations, naval headquarters, and the such. They've also hit the security apparatus, command centers for the police special units, the Basiji militias, and reportedly Tehran's revolutionary court building, where many dissidents are tried. This is footage from social media. The Institute for the Study of War published a map of the Iranian capital, showing that among the targets in the first 2 days was also the broadcasting headquarters. Now, Ali Vaez, we've heard that Isfahan has been a target as well. But what do you make of what's been hit so far?
Look, again, if you look at the range of the targets, it seems, first of all, there is a division of labor between Israel and the United States. Israel is mostly targeting military and political leaders, and the U.S. is mostly targeting Iran's retaliatory capacity, its repressive capacity. But as the war continues, it appears more and more that both Israel and the U.S. are focusing on dismantling the state in Iran. And again, this you can do if you have a plan on how to engineer some sort of a soft landing for a country of 92 million. But if you hope, you don't have a strategy, you just have a hope that you can break things and then Iranian people will come to the streets and take matters into their own hands, it really amounts to wishful thinking. And this is also, by the way, why the Iranians are lashing out. So they're doing things that they've never done before. They're targeting their Arab neighbors, with some of whom they've had very good relations, or were on the path of de-escalation in the past few years, because they feel an existential angst and they are going all out. This is why I'm saying, if you had some sort of a specific objective that was achievable within a set period of time, then this campaign would be justified one way or another. But none of those criteria apply to this war.
David Makovsky, you agree that the objectives sound fuzzy at this point in time?
Look, you have an unusual combination of things. One is you have a president who his MO, the way he operates is to always sound maximalist because he always feels he can negotiate downward from that maximalism. So he has no problem to say in the same sentence, I think with the New York Times, I would like the people to take over, but I could see a Venezuela-like situation of working with the number two. Now, those two ideas are not the same, but that's the way he operates. And I think that line about you take Trump seriously, but not always literally, I think he wants to leave himself maneuvering room, is the way I see it. A. B, I think that and maybe here Ali and I have a slight disagreement respectfully, is I think there's a difference between regime collapse and trying to degrade the capabilities of the regime, but yet to be seen as keeping faith with the Iranian people. When the president says help is on the way, what has triggered this whole round has been, the protests, whether 7,000 are killed or 32,000 are killed, we don't know, but thousands have been killed and many, many arrested. And so I think part of this is, can you create a situation where you degrade the capabilities of the regime and the nuclear and the ballistic sphere? Yes, there have been some attacks on the Basij and the IRGC headquarters and things like that, the Revolutionary Guard headquarters. But I'm not yet sure if this is about regime collapse. I think it might be focusing on the capabilities, trying to keep faith with the people, that you would like them to take that to the next level, but that I wouldn't yet set the bar that this whole operation is for sure about regime collapse at this point.
And David,
I think we just have to be cautious in making that kind of assertion.
David, you heard Ali Vaez talk about a kind of division of labor between the United States and Israel when it comes to targets. Who's in charge? Who's calling the shots?
At the end, President Trump. President Trump will decide when this war ends, and the Israelis will admit that. And look, there's been clearly a lot of consultations. It's been public. You had the visit of Eyal Zamir, the chief of staff, Omer Tischler, the incoming head of the Air Force. You're the president. You visited of Netanyahu himself. First of the 7 meetings where there was no press conference before or after. He came in the back door. I mean, there's clearly been a lot of extensive consultations, but I don't think there's any doubt that if President Trump wants to end this conflict, it ends. But as you said in your setup piece, I mean, there's no doubt that I think the Iranians have totally miscalculated in firing on the Gulf states because they've made enemies of people who wanted to stay on the fence. And so I think the Iranians, in that sense, are their own worst enemies in this conflict.
Yeah, Qatar, which says it has shot down 2 Iranian fighter jets in the past hours. It was earlier the U.S. Secretary of War, as he's now called, was specifying about U.S. goals. Pete Hegseth saying it's destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes. And then he added that, yes, the U.S. and Israeli goals may in fact differ slightly.
Israel has clear missions as well, for which we are grateful. Capable partners, as we've said since the beginning, capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force. America, regardless of what so-called international institutions say, is unleashing the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history.
Wesley Clark, we could talk about the hemming and hawing in a minute, but first let me ask you about the messaging there about how Israel and the United States don't have to be in lockstep when it comes to the ultimate goal.
I think it's natural that allies may have slightly different impressions about this thing. We have some differences, as far as I can tell. I'm not part of the administration, so I can't speak for it. But many Americans are still in favor of a 2-state solution, and certainly there's a parliamentary effort in Israel to seems to move against that. But I do think that in terms of the safety and security of Israel, I think most Americans do feel that that's important and valuable, and they certainly don't want to see it destroyed by Iranian nuclear weapons or overrun by Hezbollah coming out of Lebanon or Hamas coming out of Gaza. So I think there is a broad symmetry between the U.S. and Israeli goals in the region.
And that second part of his statement, we've heard since the UK Prime Minister saying regime change can't come from the skies. We heard earlier the French Foreign Minister stating he regrets that this wasn't put to an international forum first. As you know, again, you're the former Supreme Commander of NATO, which brings together all of the allies. Your thoughts on the language employed by Pete Hegseth?
Well, you may remember I was a Supreme Allied Commander when we did the operation in Kosovo. I actually ran an air campaign. I actually went through the doubts of our European allies. I remember some saying, oh, please, surely this won't last more than 3 or 4 days. Promise that it'll be over then, and comments like this. And there was a lot of doubt and a lot of discussion. But the United States persevered, NATO persevered, held it together. There was disagreement inside Allied military headquarters about what the appropriate targets were. We lived through that. I remember one French general told me, he said, you Americans keep trying to bomb these bridges over the river. He said, who do you think will have to rebuild those bridges? It will be France. And so he didn't want us to bomb those bridges. Okay. Well, we handle all those disagreements. So you're never going to have total agreements between allies and everything, but NATO hung together. President Clinton wanted to take ground troops off the table. He said he said, I have no intent to put ground troops in. Okay, good. In English, that means at that moment, which was very early in the campaign, he at that time had no intent. Okay, well, that doesn't mean he can't change his intent later on. And so we did use the threat of ground troops. And ultimately, that may have been what broke Milosevic's will. But there was a lot of discussion then about this and afterwards. And it just happens. I hope that this campaign will go forward smoothly. I hope the military efforts that the United States is making are going to be sufficient to take out the threat. But I want to just have one slight comeback here on something that my friend David said, which is, look, the Iranians did not make a mistake attacking these other states in the Gulf. This is their strategy. They want to cause chaos. They want to cause chaos to force the United States to stop the operation so they can have time to finish acquiring a nuclear weapon so they feel more safe and can eventually, if they choose, destroy the state of Israel and maybe put it on an intercontinental ballistic missile at some point and send it to the United States or blow it up in the sky and shut down all of the internet and all the communications in the Western Hemisphere. We don't know, but we do know this. This has been a long time coming. Every previous American president has done his best to avoid it. And the Iranian state has continued to push and push and push. So, yes, maybe the Oman foreign minister did think that the Iranians were going to be sincere this time. But did he have information, all the information that's been collected about what they're doing on getting a nuclear weapon? Probably not. Somebody has to be the adult in the room. And in this case, whether you respect him or not, like him or not, whatever, the man who's in the seat of the President of the United States, this is the time that if we're going to prevent a nuclear weapon from endangering the Mideast and the world, action had to be taken.
But General Clark, I'm glad you brought up Kosovo because you penned a piece last year talking about how before that 78-day bombing campaign, there was discussion and there was consensus built up to a degree. You wrote, quote, it's best to start with a set of principles agreed upon objectively by those outside the conflict, but with the influence and will to deal with the respective parties. That was before the bombing campaign began. This time, it's the U.S. and Israel catching everybody off guard?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not in the seat. I ran to be president 20 some odd years ago. It wasn't meant to be. And so, I'm a strong believer in diplomacy, in allied support. And as I said in the Kosovo campaign, no single target that we struck in Serbia was more important than allied unity. But in this case, this administration's decided to go a different way. I don't think they mean to offend our allies in Europe or NATO. It's just that the way things have emerged in terms of diplomacy, in terms of military capabilities, in terms of previous commitments, this has happened. So I hope there'll be a de novo consideration of what the consequences of an Iranian nuclear weapon would mean for the region and for global stability.
Tara Kongerlu, could there have been a broader coalition before coming to such an important decision?
To attack, you mean?
Yes.
I think I agree with the general that the attack is, or rather was, inevitable. Israel has done this in the past. Back in May, the negotiations were ongoing between Iran and the United States. And of course, Israel attacked unilaterally and later said that we had the support of the United States. But speaking of Kosovo, what I'm quite curious and wary of is, given the current state of affairs, given that according to people that I've been speaking with in Iran, not just Tehran, but across the country, saying that these strikes are pounding cities and are ongoing, by the way, and every command and control center that you can think of has been hit in Tehran and other major cities, and also smaller border towns. Given all of that, when the mission is accomplished, which we have yet to see, given the ambiguity as to the objectives, and one of them being Iranian people and what is in store for them, when that day comes, I am curious to know, again, in the context of Kosovo, is there going to be an international campaign? Is there going to be any form of peacekeeping? Who is going to lead Iran? Who is the opposition figure who's going to come in or somehow emerge from within the country? And that is my biggest concern, because we have seen attacks and interventions in the region and how these countries were left. I've covered Syria extensively and closely, as well as Iraq and Afghanistan. And it is significant to bear in mind the toll that all of this has on ordinary people and civilians who, in this case, in the case of Iran, many of them, interestingly enough, wanted foreign intervention because they were so resentful toward the regime, and they were pushed to such extremes to essentially suffice to any means to get rid of the current apparatus and the Islamic Republic. But what comes next worries me, or I should say, what does not come next. And I wonder when we are going to have clarity on that, because destroying and dropping bombs and pushing airstrikes across a country is easy, but what comes next to maintain peace, safety, and security is one that is hard. And one last thing I would say with regards to the safety and security of Israel, it's vital to look at what's happening in Lebanon. Mind you, that the Houthis are also one group that need to be contained if we're talking about regional safety and security, because at any moment, Iran can further unleash its assets and resources across the region.
Yeah, otherwise, put Ali Vaez, is there a plan for the day after?
No, there isn't. It's, again, as I said, all based on wishful thinking. I mean, imagine in order to completely eliminate and neutralize the repressive capacity of this regime, the Revolutionary Guards is 200,000 strong. It has a 1 million strong Basij militia and all other sorts of security forces. And the fact, take into account the fact that the massacre they committed against their own people in January was not done like in Syria with barrel bombs and chemical weapons and fighter jets and tanks, but with small arms. So if you are to completely neutralize that capacity without boots on the ground, just with the use of air power, the US will create the kind of destruction in Iran that the casualty numbers of the protests in January would pale in comparison to that, right? And even then, what is supposed to happen? Unarmed, disorganized, leaderless Iranian people are supposed to come and take over state institutions? I mean, this is delusional. And also, to go back to what you were discussing with General Kark, for whom I have tremendous respect, this is, let's be clear, this is an illegal war. It's an aggression of international law, and it's a violation of U.S. Constitution. The Congress was not consulted, and this war has happened without the consent of the American people, without any imminent threats from Iran. Yes, the Defense Intelligence Agency says by 2035, Iran might have intercontinental ballistic missiles. And even if we say it would have it in not by 2035, but in a few years, the threat was not imminent. And let's also remember that President Trump, after the 12-day war last year, came out and said, I obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. And there's no evidence that that program has restarted. And final point, let's also remember, we had a nuclear deal with Iran that had put that program in a box and under rigorous international monitoring, and President Trump chose to tear it apart.
David Makovsky, there was, I believe, a U.S. senator on one of the Sunday talk shows who said that the former U.S. head of chief of staff Colin Powell called the Pottery Barn rule: you break it, you own it, doesn't apply when it comes to Iran. Will the U.S. own what happens next in Iran?
I think it was Lindsey Graham on one of the Sunday shows. I think you're right. There's no doubt that if indeed you're facing an Iraq-like situation, that the United States is not going to be able to extricate itself. I think so easily at all. I still am not convinced that 2003 is the model. I tend to think that it is more focused on capabilities, on the ballistic missiles and things like that. I do think Trump believes that American credibility is on the line. You could say, well, he shouldn't have tweeted on Truth Social, help is on the way, if help was not on the way. For him, everything politically, I think, compares to Obama, that he said there would be a red line in terms of chemical weapons, chemicals used on the Syrian people, and that, the U.S. didn't adhere to that line. I think that was clearly a driving force in the president's thinking. And we'll have to see how this unfolds. I'm not convinced yet that the goal here is regime collapse. I think when we heard too many times from the president that he would like to somehow reach some understandings with some still in the regime, the way he did in Venezuela. They're very different countries. It's a very different, the Middle East is very different than Latin America. I could talk about this for hours, and I think our panel would probably agree. But I just think that we should be careful not to assume that we are talking about an open-ended conflict like we saw in Iraq when Colin Powell made his famous comment, if you break it, you own it. We'll see. I mean, I think the bet of the Iranians ultimately is that Trump is a one-and-done guy. Look at Baghdadi and ISIS. Look at Soleimani and the IRGC Al-Quds. Look at Maduro. Look at the B2. And his bet is that Trump doesn't have the stomach for this. And I think a lot of Trump's comments trying to scope out a maximalist position about boots on the ground and things like that is to show, no, that's not true. I do have the stomach. So we'll have to see how this unfolds. There's an element of brinkmanship in the way the way these parties are positioning themselves, even if the fighting is still underway. So, I mean, he says it could be 4 or 5 weeks, but we all know that Trump is also capable of just saying it's going to be a few days. He sees the force as an instrument of negotiations, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, there's a few variables to bring in here. First, let me begin with you, Wesley Clark. The Israelis are talking about what's called the drizzle theory, that they're right now hitting with the smaller missiles, and that they're saving their heavy firepower for later, having learned the lesson from the 12 days of that 12-day campaign last June by the U.S. And Israel. Could Iran have learned from that, and could it get worse before it gets better in the neighborhood?
Sure, it could. But what you have here is a struggle between the U.S. Navy and Air Force, their targeting systems, their ability to find and take out the missiles, the missile launchers, the storage pads, the command and control in such a tempo that the Iranians may be hoping they're saving for the big salvo will never materialize. Now, this is just a matter of effectiveness. If we're effective, there won't be any big salvo. We'll have destroyed those things in their bunkers or as they're launched, and as a last resort, maybe in the skies over Israel or over Qatar or someplace. But that's a matter of demonstrated effectiveness. And the U.S. Central Command under Admiral Cooper has to demonstrate that effectiveness. Without being on the inside of it, I can't see it. But I will tell you this, that where it should go is it should go with first air superiority, then air supremacy, so that we can continuously loiter over the launch zones. And by the way, also over the coastline where speedboats or shipping might be trying to release mines into the Straits of Hormuz. And we should take those out as they appear. They're targets of opportunity, go after them. So we'll be entering in a few days that part of the air campaign where we go from pre-planned targeting to as availability. We have eyes in the sky, we have assets up there, and if it shows up, we'll take it out. That's the intent. And at that point, if Iran thinks they can sneak out a bunch of heavy missiles and attack Israel, they're liable to be disappointed.
Ali Fayez, let me go to you first on this, because we know that Iran has been touting the fact that it learned from what happened last June, has a more decentralized chain of command this time. There can be more local initiatives on the part of provincial commanders and provincial governors. Again, Iran is how ready is it for a long fight is the question.
Look, it is absolutely true that the U.S. and Israel have a much higher capacity to inflict pain on Iran, but Iran has a higher threshold for pain. I mean, let's go back to the 12-day war. Iran lost about 1,000 of its citizens. And yet, because it didn't ask for a ceasefire, it was President Trump who took an exit ramp, and Iran survived. It called it a victory. You can't imagine a scenario in which the U.S. would lose even 100 service members and would call that a clean victory. And of course, the same applies to Israel. And there are economic factors here. There are, the human cost of it. There is also the very important question of the shortage of ammunition. This is, at the end of the day, a race of missiles against interceptors. And according to all reports that are out there, including warnings by Pentagon officials, the United States is running low on interceptors. And so I do believe that if this turns into an attritional conflict, Iran can withstand it better than the U.S. and Israel. And again, the fact that there is no clear definition of what success means in this case for the U.S. If 3 weeks from now, huge parts of Iran have been flattened and a lot of people have been killed, but the regime is still standing, it will call it a win, a Pyrrhic victory, but nevertheless a win. And I'm not sure if, in terms of consequences for the United States, radicalization that it would produce, instability that it would produce, it would be an acceptable outcome.
Tara Kongerlu, included in the mix of what you might call fog of war is Saturday's killing of the supreme leader. Some reports say that they're all cheering in the streets in Tehran. Others saying that they're preparing revenge. The killing of Ali Khamenei ultimately How will it change this fight?
Indeed, it was a momentous and historic day, as you mentioned. Iranians, many of them were cheering, dancing, singing on the street because they see him as a symbol of repression who had an iron fist over the country for over 30 years. And people see him responsible for the oppression and isolation of the nation. All of this to say that our viewers know that Iran is a nation of 90 million. It is certainly not a monolithic society, as we've been discussing. You can easily say that perhaps close to 18 to 20% of this population are somehow tied to the regime, whether it be ideologically or financially. So on the streets in Tehran and across the country, you would see people in mourning, and those are supporters of the regime. And in tandem, you would see people who are taking comfort in that potential moment and glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this is that opportunity for us to move beyond the regime. And this is why I say it is vital for the President of the United States to have clear objectives, because you have millions of ordinary civilians in Iran who have been oppressed for many years, who are now looking at this moment, again, because of what the President has said, as their escape valve, as their opening to a democracy, to a freedom and a country that they so deserve to meet their potentials. And I think this is why it's extremely dangerous, reckless, and irresponsible to not have a clear path and an end game. And today, in the meeting today that the President Trump held at the White House, he mentioned pretty much everything short of the Iranian people and his goals for the people on the ground. And Francois, I was in Saudi Arabia just a few weeks ago, and I was speaking with an official from the foreign ministry, and we were just chatting, and he said Iran and its people have some of the greatest potential, not just the region, but the world. And jokingly, he said, one day, if Iran meets its full potential, or even half, it actually would be detrimental for the region, because they will be the greatest competition that we've seen and we've had, not necessarily for security reasons, but just imagine what Iran and its people can produce, the commercial engagements, tourism, and again, the great potential that this country of 90 million has. And I believe this is why, at the moment, a weak and destroyed Iran is not necessarily something unattractive to the region, of course, absent of its direct impact on them, whether that will be an influx of refugees or radicalization that can bleed into those countries. But leaving Iran at its weakest, where its people, its greatest asset, are also choked and sort of left alone, some may argue would serve certain countries and their interests.
And that certainly primes the pump for another discussion. Alas, we're out of time. Tarek Angelou, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Wesley Clark, Ali Vaez, David Makovsky for joining us here in the France 24 debate.